First story. Got angry and damaged my car, got her a £2,000 fine, and her car crushed and her tenancy put into question. I live in a maisonette house in the UK. A 4 in a block and the only parking is on the street. I recently got my license and put onto appearance insurance to keep costs low. That's where this story starts. I have this neighbor who is an awful driver, crashed at least 2 cars, and who also fly tip abandoned rubbish in their gardens, blocking our fire escape, and this is all relevant information. I parked my car outside one day on street parking, and she pulled up right behind me, blasted her horn and started swearing at me to move out of her space, opened my door and threatened to smash my car up. I locked my car and went inside, ignoring her completely. I looked out the window and she parked her car on my bumper, then placed another car she owns on my other bumper, causing slightly paint damage and making sure I couldn't get to work the next day. This continued for a few weeks. Her parking right on my car or parking her 2 cars over 4 spaces. Keep in mind I own my house and she rents hers, meaning we have parking rights over her due to having the parking passes. I had enough of this after a while. I ran the license plate for both of her cars through a website that tells you the MOT status of a vehicle. Car 1 MOT'd and Car 2 MOT expired. What this basically means is a car cannot be driven or even on public land. And I had the information I wanted. I called the council, whose authority it is to report the car, and told them about an abandoned vehicle parked outside my house, unrestricted parking times. They got back to me and told me they had passed it on to the police. I then decided to phone her landlord about her fly tipping in the back garden. He came, spoke to me, and my parents investigated and put her lease into contest because she had blocked our escape route and left the stuff abandoned. I kept calling about the car every day for about a month until one day she moved the car to another car park around the corner, again onto public land. I reported it again, this time with evidence it had moved. The council arrived that day and stuck a ticket on it saying that they were made aware the vehicle was abandoned and the owner had to contact them to get it moved. Today I woke up and saw a note taped on the car saying that the vehicle will be crushed in 7 days if she doesn't respond to them, and that the car has an outstanding fine of £1,872, and it will be increased if this action is taken, meaning she calls him or gets it crushed. Safe to say, I don't think she will damage my car or swear at it again. I also don't think in future she will ignore the council calls for her to respond to them. Next story. A story of money. My grandma told me this story recently about her brother. So this is the scenario. My grandma comes from a family of 5, 4 girls and 1 boy. My great-grandfather Hank was ecstatic with the boy. We will call him Jack. One more important thing is that my great-grandfather ran a very successful company that made a high-end clothing and bathroom silks, towels, bathrobes. He made a fortune with his company and made sure everyone who worked for the company got his fair share. He also looked after the family. All his children got an education. All his children got the chance to get their driver's license. It was in the 1960s, so it was a big deal back then. They were the first in my hometown with a car, radio, and TV. My great-grandfather treated everyone equally. That changed when his first and only son was born. He already had 4 girls, and now finally a son. The roadmap was laid out for him. He will be the heir to his company. So began the upbringing of Jack. He was, let's say, a kid with a mouse. This wasn't bad per se, the thing was that his father allowed it. Jack got kicked from his first school, Jack got caught for shoplifting, Jack got kicked from his second school, and Jack got caught joyriding and so on and so on. Hank did not sit Jack down and tell him the severity of his actions, but he would shrug it off and tells his wife that they were just childhood quirks. Anna, his wife, tried to make something out of Jack, but it was a lost cause. Jack became 18 and Hank decided that it was time to introduce him into the company. The company did better than ever and the whole family was involved. Jack began at the bottom of the ladder and had to work his way up. This is where Jack began to shine. A shine my grandmother meant that her brother was not a bright light at school, but he was a hard worker and had a nose for business. Not so much for people though. Jack was being a jerk as per usual and got married to his first Karen. His first wife was a Karen and she wanted to start her own company, and her father-in-law Hank wanted to retire. She pushed Jack to take over quickly and pushed the rest of the family out. Jack listened to her and talked to his father how he was ready and how his sisters and their husbands were tearing the company apart if they would stay in their leadership roles. The thing was that only one daughter and son-in-law were involved in the company at this point. At 1980, my grandmother oversaw the seamstresses and the quality department, and my grandfather oversaw the financial and the suppliers. Karen wanted full control and started a little fire in the family. She spread a rumor that my grandfather stole from the company. I do not know what transpired, but in the end, my great-grandfather bought all the family and Jack bought out great-grandfather. And now the company was Jack and Karen's company. And things went south pretty quickly. Seamstresses quitted, bills were not paid, and Jack had to take a loan from great-grandfather. The family company was barely scraping by, and Karen left Jack because he could not provide for her. It became apparent that Jack could not make it work and was looking for a way out. After a while, great-grandfather had seen enough and bought back the remnants of his company and sold it to a bigger company that wanted to expand. This made the wealth he amassed even bigger. He set up different banking accounts for his children and said that if someone was in need, they could take money from that account. He told Jack his cut was smaller as he was the reason he sold the company, and that he was let down by the carelessness his son had run his company into the ground. Jack was angry and told his father that he could have made it work if he had more time. It remained a sour point between the two of them. Things went well for a while, but Jack married the second time with a woman named Helen. Helen, like Karen, wanted her own business. Jack agreed and took money from the account in order to start Helen's company. The business was a little barber shop and ran pretty well. They were spending their money on luxury and did not save any money. After a while, my grandmother got a call from her little brother Jack to see if he could store some goods in her garage. My grandfather did not trust Jack and told him no, and my grandmother did not agree, but they agreed to it. A few weeks later, Jack got caught for possession of stolen goods and drug smuggling. It was not a surprise, but nonetheless a letdown for my great-grandfather Hank. This time he would not help Jack, and told him that he would no longer stand by him. After a few years, Jack got out and was again a divorced man. He married again and divorced another 3 times, and each time, he gave these women a business and lived lavishly. New cars, big houses, expensive vacations. He drained his money and robbed his emergency bank account dry. He loaned a lot of money from great-grandfather, and so on. In 2013, great-grandfather became ill. It was clear that he was not gonna make it and took his final days in stride. At this time, Jack became very buddy-buddy and started to help great-grandfather sell some stuff. At some point, my grandmother sat down with her father and asked him where the money went for the sold stuff, and great-grandfather told her not to worry about it. He took care of it in his will. After his 95th birthday, he passed away quietly and in peace. After his funeral, they all went to listen to the will of their father. All except Jack, who had given a power of attorney to my grandmother to sign the will in his place. All the children get their fair share, but at the end of the notary public tells them to sign the papers and the inheritance is completely theirs. At some point, my grandma called my dad. She has inherited some collateral papers, all sorts of papers that stated that someone owned my great-grandfather's money. My father said that she has to call a lawyer's office to get the money from these papers. A few days after this call to the lawyer's office, my grandmother gets a call from her brother, asking why she was taking his money from the inheritance. My grandmother tells him that she has inherited some collateral papers and that she wants to get the money from them. And Jack was furious, and he told her that this was illegal. Jack was wrong. Great-grandfather had documented every penny his son had loaned from him and constructed his will in such a way that the rest of his children could get that part of their money from their money drain of a brother. Also, great-grandfather found out Jack stole from him. You see, Jack was putting the money he made from the sold stuff on his own banking account instead of giving it to his father. After this ordeal, Jack has not contacted my grandmother or his sisters. He has since then paid everything back and has never seen a penny from his inheritance. Great-grandfather has confided in a letter why he did this. He was done with his son. All the lying, the careless things he had done to his company, all the money he had blown and not taken any responsibility. And he decided to give his final lesson to his son from the grave. Next story. Mail Karen and Property Lines, 2nd edition. I'm a senior construction superintendent in the DFW area. The project I'm currently on is a 13-acre site smack in the middle of an extremely affluent area to the north of Dallas. 3 weeks ago, a city inspector that we will call Joe came into the site office and said that they received a complaint about a sprinkler/soaker line being damaged during excavation for the fire lane. He, my landscaper, and myself went to investigate and discovered where a small fitting had blown out of the line. The landscaper repaired it. I went up to knock on the door to explain to them the issue and inform them of the repair. And I got no answer at the door. So I left a card and a note asking them to call me. They never did. A week later, Joe comes in and mentioned that they have reached out again about the noise from the equipment, which is odd, because anyone with heavy equipment is currently working on the other end of the property. I again went to speak with them, got no answer at the door and left the card again. Yesterday, while walking, Joe told me that they are complaining about our construction fence being on their property and killing their grass. The fence is 12 feet from their fence, and our specs call for it to be a minimum of 15 feet from the property line. So I pull up our CAD files on the survey plat, so I can make sure we have it placed exact and realize that their wood fence is 4 feet onto our property. Their house is about 14 inches onto our property. During all of this, I get an email from the city asking me to place a construction fence squarely on our property line. The email sent to me, the apparent homeowner Joe, and my project manager. I brought the surveyors back out yesterday to pinpoint our property corners and give us some 10 feet offsets. Reference point 10 feet east of the property line for line of sight to measure from. I knocked on the homeowner's door again and got no answer. Mind you, every time there were cars in the driveway. Fast forward to this morning, my fence crew showed up and they began moving the fence onto the property line, which take 2 feet 7 inches of their driveway. And 18 feet off the road where it ends at the property was previously a cul-de-sac. The client finally reached out, or more accurately, came to the site office in a huff. I explained the issue, showed him the plant, and he left with some unkind words flowing from him, like diesel exhaust on a steep incline. I put a pause on the fence relocation, just to soothe the wound. My project manager called him. I called the city right-of-way engineer and our client, We set up a meeting that just ended. He claimed that our plat was wrong. The engineer and everyone else disagreed. The back and forth went on long enough for the client, who is an extremely laid-back and quiet gentleman, to finally speak up and basically say, "We're just gonna go ahead and sell you the property you've stolen at current market value plus 10%. In this area that is not cheap. If that is not acceptable, we will just have you move your fence, cut out your driveway, and use the east side of your home for advertisement. Or you can back off, let these guys work, and we will give you lifetime use of the area you currently occupy, so long as there is no more hassling of any kind." The guy asked me if we'd move the fence back out, and I told him no. I agreed to take it off his driveway, but the street and green space belonged to us. We only did what he asked us to do. The engineer who asked me to move it agreed. So there it is, story again, the fallout and the conclusion.